This is I Don't Speak German. I'm Jack Graham, he, him, and in this podcast I talk to my friend Daniel Harper, also he, him, who spent years tracking the far right in their safe spaces. In this show we talk about them and about the wider reactionary forces feeding them and feeding off them. Be warned, this is difficult subject matter. Content warnings always apply. Whither is fled the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? I don't know. What you asking me for? What I do know, however, is what podcast this is. It's I Don't Speak German, episode 111. And I'm here with Daniel, who will now speak.
Hey, that was a Fifth Element reference, just in case anybody didn't notice. But, you know, it's fine.
I actually didn't notice, but it's good. It's very good. And this is also a very special episode because we have with us a special guest, YouTube's own José. Hi, José.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Am I supposed to make a Fifth Element joke?
Yeah, that's it. We should have warned you before the show started. When you start, you have to make a Fifth Element joke. Yeah, it's an eccentric rule of ours, but it is our rule nonetheless. So yeah, you can't be on the show now, I'm afraid. That's it. It's over.
I record every episode in the Mila Jovovich bandage costume, just to be clear. I put that on every time, regardless of how it smells. That's how this goes.
So glad this is not in person right now.
Yes, well, we're off to a great start, obviously.
This is how you know that I respect our guest hosts. Is I reveal terrible things about my fetishes regarding 1997 sci-fi movies. So
it's the ultimate tribute. But we do actually have some other things to talk about besides Daniel's attire. As glorious as that is.
Really, what we were going to do is to talk about the extended home improvement universe, based on José's brilliant video regarding the sitcom, the Tim Allen sitcom, Home Improvement. That's where we were going to go for this, right?
I'm up for that.
Are we going to explore whether or not Last Man Standing is just home improvement in a parallel universe? Because that's a theory I've heard out there.
I would actually really love to see you tackle Last Man Standing. I have so many thoughts about Tim Allen, and not just because, and this is doxing in a level that we have not done on this podcast previously. Tim Allen and I actually share an alma mater. I actually know people who did coke with Tim Allen in the 70s. So you should definitely message me if you do anything else with Tim Allen, José.
Oh, that would be really valuable, though. I feel like if I'm watching Last Man Standing, things have already gone disastrously wrong where I wanted to take my YouTube channel.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, because, your YouTube channel usually confines itself to only the most savory of people, doesn't it, and subjects. Mind you, we can talk, can't we?
Yeah.
People might have caught the recent video that you did, José, on Elijah Schaffer and associated subjects, which I think my voice actually pops up in that, which surprised me when I watched it the first time. And Daniel, I think, conferred with you a little bit behind the scenes on making that. But that was an excellent video.
Well, thanks. It's just kind of interesting. He's one of those topics that when I started, I didn't think it would go quite as bad as it thought it had eventually gotten, how just dark that whole space is, and him in particular. But it was an experience.
For me, the amusing part is that, like, I look at that and go, like, yeah, look at all the the shit that Jose left out that was way, way darker. It's kind of where I land on it, because like it would never be allowed on YouTube ultimately. That's the maybe that's my own bias, but like chatting behind the scenes, it's like, and look at all this shit, and Jose is like, silent vomiting noise. I
mean, to be honest, with what I got in that video, I'm surprised I got it without any real trouble on YouTube. There was like certain clips in there. I was thinking like, I don't even know how he was able to upload this. How am I going to upload it? Where it's just like in a series of horrible things. And yeah, absolutely. There was stuff that just couldn't fit in that video. That like, where do you just drop in the random clip of him saying, like one example, he made a comment about Muslim people all wanting to have sex with animals. I don't have time. Like I would have to spend another 15 minutes going into like the history of just bigotry towards Muslim populations and from people like Schaffer and the right. So sadly, I had to make a few cuts.
Yeah, no, that wasn't a criticism. But I am curious. My memory is that you messaged me, because I think we had maybe like mutual followed each other and then like maybe chatted a little bit, and then like I had posted about doing something like more serious about Elijah Schaffer, and you had messaged me, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but like I'm wondering sort of like what the process that led you to doing this video was.
Sure. Well, it started actually a long while ago. I was sort of vaguely aware of Elijah Schaffer back in 2020. I knew he was this guy covering Black Lives Matter demonstrations and showing up and spreading around a lot of footage that was deliberately shot and edited to make the demonstrators look as negative as possible. And at the time, he was just, one of many guys like that out there. But he just kept popping up like just this, like a bad penny everywhere you looked. He just would turn up. I noticed he showed up in that Lauren Southern movie that no one watched called Crossfire, which is basically just propaganda. And he's interviewed. And I remember seeing him at the time and feeling kind of bad for him, because he had this almost emotional breakdown when he was talking about his experience. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy seems like he has PTSD or something. There's like something not quite right here. And then he would show up again on like when I was doing work on Tim Pool, like, oh, there he is showing up on Timcast. And then I'd move on to like Tucker Carlson, and there he is again. And he just seemed to get increasingly detached and always just so animated. Like when you hear him talk, he's just so on the edge of his seat, bursting at the seams, talking about, I don't know, like Mr. Potato Head or something, and how it's like the downfall of civilization. And I just started thinking, you know what, at some point I might want to look at this guy, because he just seems so strange. He just wears his heart on his sleeve in a way that's not that common among some of the people I cover anyways. Like there are other people who are much more careful operators. So I thought like he would be a good vantage into that world where he's someone who's a bit more unguarded. And then it just so happened I've been listening to this podcast for a while, and hearing you guys talk about Elijah Schaffer made me think, I thought you'd be a good resource to reach out to and speak to on this subject. I know we had briefly like interacted on Twitter for like half a second about Lauren Southern, and you just sort of said if there's anything that ever comes up, and I thought, you know what, maybe this is something that has come up, and it did. And once we got into contact, it went from there.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, like, Jose and I like chatted and like shared some notes back and forth, and ultimately the video that Jose made is not something I would ever have made. Like that's not an I Don't Know Sweet German episode. That's something like completely independent. I think it's a brilliant video that kind of took our conversations and went like far beyond, or at least far elsewhere than what would have been on the show. And like I love it. I've watched it like 5 times. So
wow, it's more than me actually. Thanks for that. I definitely did want to go in its own direction. I remember when I was speaking with you about it, there were like some ideas there that I don't know, they just got the wheels turning in my own head. And part of it was just speaking to the audience I already know I have, which I'm sure there's a lot. Well, I've seen the comments. There's definitely an overlap with this podcast, but
also the haters that may come up later, but continue.
Oh yeah, sure. We can make some time for them. But like this podcast goes in some more like really intense, dark directions. And it's tougher to do that on YouTube in general. And also I know my channel, thanks to some of the media criticism I do, also speaks to a more mainstream audience at times as well. So I wanted something that was expansive, but also accessible. So it wasn't just, so that's why I decided to sort of branch it out, not just Schaffer himself, but like the structures and system that make a person like this possible, or make it possible for them to have a career in media.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like to think that like what we're doing here is to provide the like information and the perspective for, even like mainstream media, like, people from like, respectable outlets, not to say that you're not a respectable outlet, but, like the New York Times, the Washington Post will like message me and go, can I get a quote from you? And then like, usually it's like, not anything like, but at least like to provide like an informational resource for people. And so like, I have there's no complaint from me. Like I love the video. I think it's great. I highly recommend people watch it. It will be, of course, the first link in the show notes. So if anyone has listened to this and hasn't watched this video, please go watch the video. It's great. Among other things, one of the things that I really appreciated was that you like plugged it into kind of the like a potted history of the religious right, and sort of used sort of Schaffer's rhetoric and Schaffer's kind of place within this kind of right wing ecosystem, and like plugged it into like kind of what was going on in the late 70s and early 80s. Would you like to kind of talk a little bit about that and expand on it maybe from what you did in the video?
Sure. Well, the story goes back really far, and I sort of chose the 70s and 80s just because, particularly around the discourse of abortion and how that's often propagated as this myth, really, about what activated the evangelical movement on the right to galvanize into what would be the moral majority in the 1980s. But when you actually examine what was going on there, you'll see it was actually more of a not so bottom up, but rather top down, politically, or particularly through political operatives who were trying to galvanize this religious base into voting for the Republican Party. And to do that, there was like a lot of different ways in which they would test different issues that you would see that would eventually make up what would be the platform of the group called the Moral Majority. Sort of vague anti-gay rhetoric, abortion, of course, and other issues. But the only reason the leadership got on board with this wasn't because they felt as if their values were under attack, but rather it was to save their tax-exempt status as a religious organization, particularly their schools. And because at the time, the civil rights legislation had passed, which was cracking down on certain religious schools, Bob Jones University being a prominent example, that were trying to enforce a whites-only student body. The justification is actually kind of funny. They argued that since they were taking any government funding, they shouldn't be subject to any laws coming from the federal government, even though, tax-exempt status is a government benefit. And then, to protect these institutions as they from having to pay taxes, basically, they started cycling through these issues and sort of propagandizing them and creating movies, providing these like sermons to their congregations. They started really galvanizing the sort of rank and file in their churches, and they would organize, and soon you had this giant political movement, which just 10 years ago was relatively indifferent towards subjects like abortion. And now it's sort of taken as just sort of a foundational myth of this right-wing Christian group, which, propagated throughout the 1980s, 90s, all right up to the present, that it was somehow some sort of moral statement when it was really based on greed and racism.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a larger story there around like sort of like a congealing of, like Catholic anti-abortion groups with kind of evangelical Christian groups, which is outside of the scope of both this podcast and your video, which I think people have like kind of pushed back slightly on the kind of sociopolitical nature of the rise of the religious right, which I've seen in the last couple of months, especially with the sort of the upcoming overturning of Roe v. Wade. Yay, life is getting great. Yeah, overturn Roe v. Wade. Yeah, that's something we all get to look forward to. Yay. But I definitely agree. And I find like some of the figures, I just kind of like, I kept like putting my finger on and going like, oh yeah, you're talking about X person. And that's a thing that I could do a whole episode about. And I'm sure you could do a whole video about. There is this like hugely complex history that kind of gets like left behind in terms of some of even those of us who have a very the best intentions. Sometimes the history gets lost in terms of tracking sort of the immediate. And I don't know, this might be like a bigger question than you want to answer, and go wherever you want with it. But how do you kind of confront that with your own work in general?
Well, in general, it's always a challenge to ask, where does the story start? And it really varies by topic. I mean, sometimes you want to go back to the start of when a person started their career in media, for instance. I remember one of the first big videos I did was on Dave Rubin, a fascinating topic, of course. So I started off with his career in...
That is a great video.
Yeah, thanks. It was, I feel like it was one of the first in the field of Rubinology.
We should hook you up with Ina. If you're not in contact already.
She and I have not been in contact, but I've been enjoying her podcast for years. It's actually through her I found this podcast, funnily enough.
Awesome.
So she's fantastic, nice. and I very much appreciate her Dave Rubin stances. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but no, that video is kind of a touchstone for me, because your video on Rubin, because that makes it very clear, something I think is very important. It makes very clear, which is that these people, and it doesn't absolve them in any way, but they are led by their audience. That thing where Rubin drifts further and further in a particular political direction, led by the section of the audience that rewards some behavior and punishes other behavior. No, I love that video.
Yeah, that part in particular was me trying to wrap my head what I had seen happen. Because I'll say this with a bit of shame. When I first saw Dave Rubin go out on his own, I was optimistic. I was hopeful. I thought he was going to be the guy who talked to all sides and gave us interesting perspectives on politics. And as within a few months, it became clear that he was not up to the task. And worse yet, he was being influenced by these commenters who were just rewarding him for having these absolute ghouls on and not challenging them or pushing back in any meaningful way. And look where he is now. He went from being, the last liberal or something, and now he's just another Trump supporter.
Yeah. This question of being like captured by your audience is fascinating. And in particular, sorry, not to jump around, but Sydney Watson, who you spoke about a bit in your video about Elijah Schaffer, in terms of the interview with Nick Fuentes. I think a lot of what made her leave was less, this kind of particular, kind of interaction with, Nicky Boy, as we call him here. But the fact that, the audience is literally trolling her to make her do Holocaust, denial memes and that sort of thing, live on the show. They're just sort of designing their super chats in a way to make her read the most horrifying shit imaginable. And, it does kind of show that maybe the audience interaction kind of goes both ways in some ways.
Sure. And I also could have brought up that altercation she had with Jack Murphy, where
I don't know anything about that.
The Cuck letter.
Well, she was forced to read a super chat. Well, I shouldn't say forced, but it was part of her job to read super chats. There was an altercation, and it just seemed like that was her job, I guess, to read these horrible things. And I'm sure the audience or the person who sent that super chat at the very least knew exactly what they were doing when they sent it in.
Yeah,
and it seems to be a routine for her, or was a routine when she was with still on that show.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of going hypothesis is that Elijah just got like more and more overtly religious, and she, as an atheist, just kind of couldn't deal with it anymore. Like, I don't think it has to go any more complicated than that, but like, I think that it's a straw that broke the camel's back ultimately. But this is all speculation. We are not speaking journalistically at least in this juncture.
I don't speak journalism.
Yeah.
Do we know where Elijah is with Glen now after the Mormons are all going to hell incident?
I have not seen any changes there. I know he is on vacation. His whole week he's had fill-in hosts. I don't know if that was a planned vacation or not, but
we could talk about the fill-in hosts if you have observed that at all, Jose.
I've seen a few clips. I have not watched the episodes though.
Oh, I have. It's John Doyle was the lead on one of them, and then Alex Stein was the lead on the other one. And John Doyle is literally talking about the viral clips that went live, of the Christian fascists going to a drag show and going when we take power, you won't have any rights. Like, that's the guy. And they're literally bragging about this. And it's the most disgusting anti-trans, anti-gay, anti any, kind of beyond, it is the most overtly fascist thing, imaginable outside of, literal Jew hatred, it's like 3 steps removed from the Daily Show ultimately. And I find it on an intellectual level, I find it fascinating that this gets broadcast, and on a personal level, I find it absolutely terrifying. And so I don't know. How do you square that circle, Jose?
It's very tough to really grasp how some of this stuff gets on YouTube. Aside from the fact that the temperature feels like it's slowly been going up for years now, to the point where, some of the stuff Elijah was saying was pretty shocking, outright calls for violence and just bullying random people on the internet. And John Doyle is obviously, he's just as bad, if not worse.
He's worse. He's worse. And not to say Elijah Schaffer is not bad. John Doyle is worse. John Doyle is Nick Fuentes with the very roughest of rough edges followed off. That's how bad John Doyle is, just to be clear.
Sure. I'd accept that assessment. I don't know. John Doyle is one of those guys. Also makes me feel bad, sad for him, because he'll just say things and he'll kind of let things slip. He's not quite as sloppy as Elijah, but he'll let things slip where you can tell there's a lot of insecurity there, and a lot of just this. He seems like a sad boy, basically, playing at being a fascist. Although I don't doubt for a second he would love to be a real one. One day he might grow up, I guess. But it's just kind of shocking that you can be an open fascist on YouTube and still have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And they might comment about the algorithm is supposedly hiding them or whatever. And as a YouTuber, I can tell you with certainty, when the algorithm is hiding you, because you can present the evidence. And these guys never seem to do that. And it's just, they're just sort of out there and with no real sort of filter, I guess. No, they use dog whistles, I guess, but
there's a hidden factor here, which is they're part of the Blaze. They're part of the Glen Beck's, media network.
Is John Doyle on there?
John Doyle, I think. Let me look it up. Go ahead and say what you got to say, Jack.
I was just going to say, this is really interesting to me because it does. As somebody who doesn't really do YouTube, I have a channel, but I don't use it seriously. whereas you, Jose, you're a successful YouTuber. You know how to use the system. You might have some insight. Well, I'm sure you do have insights on this. It seems sort of as a semi-outsider looking in, like they can just say or do whatever the hell they like. Whereas people like yourself, I mean, even in this conversation, you were talking earlier about having to be careful what you can put into your video, what you can get away with. When you're literally talking about clipping or repeating for analytical purposes, journalistic coverage purposes, what they do and say. And it seems the imbalance is quite stark.
Yeah, in those cases, for instance, I'm sure Elijah Schaffer doesn't need to worry about it because he's part of Blaze, where they are paying him. Whereas I mean, I have to hopefully I have a few patrons supporting me, but that AdSense money does, make a difference in my life. So he can just say whatever he wants, and whether it's fully monetized or not, it doesn't make a difference to him because he's got this whole media company that's going to pay him regardless. And they sort of, being part of that network to a degree does offer you some protection. I mean, I can use the example of Steven Crowder, a guy who just pumps just unfiltered racism on his channel and just cyberbullying of like specific individuals. But he's also got 5 million subscribers. Even with like limited monetization, that's still a lot of money for YouTube. And ultimately that bottom line is something that they're more concerned about. And, someone like me, who's only got about 150, when I put a video out there, there's a chance it might get limited monetization or no monetization. And I can challenge that. But, even that's a roll of the dice. I've had videos that were basically going over facts and trying to sort of responsibly discuss something, get slammed down with monetization penalties from one reviewer, or then I would upload it, a few days later because I had to make some changes, and then it would be fine for monetization. And then I'd have to make changes, and all of a sudden the reviewer would say, actually, it's not fine anymore. It's a very arbitrary system, and very frustrating if you're someone who in any way counts on that AdSense money.
Yeah. It must be incredibly frustrating. Is part of it just the usual imbalance between the ease with which the right can pump material out and the difficulty of countering it, or because that seems to be a thing with reactionary YouTubers as well. Well, just reactionaries online generally, just the volume of material. Tim Pool and Jimmy Dore, who you've also done a very good video about Jimmy Dore, and Steven Crowder. The volume of material that they just pump out, it's constant. It's a tsunami. Whereas if you're covering these people, you have to kind of you have to pick over it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating part of it. Whenever I do a response to one of those channels that just pumps out so much content, I'll sit down and go through everything. And by the time my video is ready, I always feel a bit bad because it's a month after all this stuff has been said. It's all been done. So ideally you'll try and make something that's a bit more timeless to show that these narratives are occurring over weeks or months even. And in that sense, you can kind of push back, but by then they've already moved on to the next thing and they're pushing the next nonsense talking points. And it takes time to get things right. And that's time they don't need to take advantage of that time because they're not so much concerned with getting things right as they are with pushing a narrative. So they can go out there and say just absurdly ridiculous things. I still remember when Tim Pool was talking about, and this was shortly before or when the COVID vaccines were first coming out, he said it was something like either a 0.02, something like that, % chance that you'll suffer anaphylaxis if you take that vaccine, which is just that's ridiculous. I mean, anaphylactic shock could kill a person. And he's saying there it's like a 1 in 5,000 chance you could experience that from taking that vaccine. Obviously not true, like not even close to true. And it would only take 5 seconds of reading that article more carefully to see it was an allergic reaction, like, I don't know, like a rash or something. And that's just a dramatic difference in what he's trying to say there. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. He's not there to accurately report the facts on what this vaccine does. He's there to tell people vaccine bad. And I will read the news through whatever prism I need to reinforce that narrative that the vaccine is bad.
Yeah, absolutely. But does the sheer volume of material that they produce kind of insulate them from the kind of consequences that might harm a YouTuber such as yourself, where some, in terms of the sanctions that YouTube itself might put on your material?
Yeah, I'm sure it does, because if I have one video that gets heavily censored or removed or what have you, that's a month's work that I am now out of. Whereas if you put out, I don't know, 15 videos a week, and even if a third of them vanish into the ether, that's still like 10 videos that are going to get like 100,000 views plus in some cases. And there's actually something really funny that happened when I was working on that Jimmy Dore video. I don't even remember if I put this in my video because it was just, I didn't know what to make of it. He actually had a video that got pulled down, and he just redid the whole thing a few days later, but he just omitted the section that got him in trouble with YouTube. So it was like, at worst, it cost him a few days, whatever revenue he was making off of that thing. And he was just able to do the whole thing all over again. Once again, related to COVID, of course, and downplaying the risk. But I recognized it right away because I'd been watching so much of his content, and this other video came up and it was just him telling jokes I know I had heard, because I remember myself not laughing at them the first time. And so when I went back in my notes and I just looked, it's like, oh, beat for beat, this is the same video. He's just doing it again.
It is entirely possible that I have both of those videos in my archive, by the way. If you can give me the title or something, I can look in my archive, because I archive every about 4 days. So just FYI.
Can I just say that, having covered Jimmy Dore a bit myself, I feel a deep sense of kinship with you right now, Jose. brothers.
I feel like they're better bonds to have, but absolutely. There's something uniquely unfunny about that guy. It's just, and he's so unlikable. I don't see the appeal aside from the rage, I guess, but that was a long couple of weeks. Couple of weeks.
Yeah. I know
the Jimmy Dore phenomenon. Yeah. The Jimmy Dore aesthetic is like sitting cross-legged, like cross to the camera, and then pointing vaguely to something that's on a green screen behind you. And I find it like, look, I'm perfectly fine with, not everybody can do fully, aesthetically etiquette videos and that sort of thing. But like Jimmy Dore is like particularly bad at this. And yeah, no, I agree. Like, I don't get it. I just don't understand why anyone would find this person at all compelling. Yeah.
For some people, I guess it's just they need a certain narrative reinforced, and they'll go to whatever angry man on YouTube will reinforce that narrative.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different angry men, that will scratch different itches aesthetically. I think the not to reignite the Jimmy Dore discourse, which I think we're done with for the most part, but on this show. But I think there is that, it's just the market filling a gap, isn't it? There is something about some people want to see this stuff coming from a kind of angry, befuddled boomer who says he's a leftist. That seems to be what some of the audience want. So he's cornered that gap.
Yeah. And his audience can then say, it's like, yeah, I listen to people on the left. I listen to Jimmy Dore. It's like, I'm sure it makes you feel like you have a well-rounded diet, but he's really just, he's an older, angrier Tim Pool at this point. So
I listen to people on the left who just reiterate the talking points I got on the right. That's how you know it's a fair and balanced thing in my head. I am a rationalist, don't you understand?
So do we have a result on John Doyle?
He is not part of the Blaze Network, as far as I can tell. But the fact that he has been on Slightly Offensive so many times tells me that if he is not being directly funded by someone who is connected to Glen Beck, he will be very shortly. I think it is worth noting that he has not appeared in any of the TPUSA events or anything like that, except in the background, where Elijah Schaffer is interviewing him. So it feels like more that he's auditioning for a role in a Blaze TV kind of thing. So that was my mistake. I was thinking like, no, clearly he's part of that network, and no, it doesn't seem like he is. So.
And yet, kind of, he is as well, by the looks of it, or at least beginning.
I mean, he's part of the social network. He's part of that, like the group. You know what I mean? And I think that's what strikes me in terms of like the kind of conversation about YouTube, which we've been talking about for a while, is that. And José brings this up, briefly, but I think very pertinently in his video, is there are like networks of, kind of left-leaning YouTuber people, the Young Turks, like for all the problems that I have with the Young Turks and Chinkalet Uyghur and, all of that network, that is at least a like manifestly like kind of, partisan Democrat, left of center, kind of network. But like even as big as the Young Turks is, it gets like dwarfed by the quantity of the stuff on the right. And the only way that anyone, can pretend that these two things are equal is to bring in like Jimmy Kimmel thinks that maybe we should not have children die of cancer because they can't pay for it, and therefore Jimmy Kimmel Live is leftist, in terms of its like political ideology, which he was a little on the Man Show in the 2000s. Like, go fuck yourself, not to say that I have like some deep problem with Jimmy Kimmel. It's just like, there's a very different kind of like scale of these things. Like, and again, José brings that up briefly in his video, which, and that's kind of where we land on this. It's not so much like, I think in 2022, the length of content, because while I think that is a factor, today, it is less of a factor than it was when, like, sort of the live streaming, the blood sports era, in which there were like 22-hour live streams of like Nazis just literally like pursuing Holocaust denial for 100 people. It feels like a very different environment now, and Elijah Schaffer seems to be kind of at the center of the kind of the current era in terms of, we don't go quite so far as to literally like deny the Holocaust. We don't talk about the Jews, quote unquote. We don't talk about like elimination. We don't talk about that, but we do go really up to the edge of that. And that's kind of where the far right is in 2022, at least in terms of the YouTube community. Like, they've learned how far they can go. And that's kind of the terrifying thing for me, because like what that means is they can kind of push their ideas further into the mainstream. And I think you need to look no further than the fact that Patriot Front is, hauling themselves into U-Hauls, 31 people at a time, to go on to drag events in Idaho to quote unquote protest, which is to say, violently oppose. And that's what I think we're going to be seeing more and more this summer. I mean, I think 2022 is going to be the new 2017 in terms of, summer events. And we all know what the end of 2017 meant,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And what's really scary though is in 2017, it felt like it was this, I know it technically wasn't new, but it still had this kind of outsider status. But with someone like Elijah Schaffer, like Blaze Media or the Daily Caller or PragerU, or these just now institutions, these entities that exist on YouTube and other platforms to push this just really hard right talking points to the mainstream, it feels like there's now this institutional support behind these really odious people. So like, I mean, I certainly had a good laugh yesterday seeing those idiots get arrested for trying to interrupt that Pride event. But, I don't know how long that's going to last. Like, how many times because I don't think they're going to stop. I'm sure there's probably going to be another event, and will the cops be there, or will the cops even bother to do anything this time? Maybe the cops will even help them out in some cases. And it feels like this isn't just 2017. This is 2017, but like the side that was threatening everyone else has learned some, unfortunately, very useful lessons. And I would be shocked if they didn't put those into action.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is why the next few episodes are going to be completely about like the TRS Instituted Universe, which we were going to do previously, but then like some mass shooters got in the way, yeah,
we have that problem repeatedly, don't we? Yeah, it's funny. We talked about this in the last episode, feeling like the cycle had sort of started again, and here we are on the upswing. And it's 2017 all over again, but this time we have a Republican Party that is just the MAGA party now, essentially, which is a fascist party, just openly and institutionally, and pretty much with the leadership resigned to it or enthusiastic. And we're also now post-COVID and post-massive global recession. In the middle of the Russian invasion and occupation of Ukraine, global food shortages. It's 2017 again, but it's 2017 with every screw ratcheted up to its tightest pitch, which is wonderful, obviously.
Well, and the far right has learned the lessons of 2017. I think that's something that is really not being reported on. Like Elijah Schaffer.
Yeah, it's 2017, but it's also post 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that you and I, Jack, discussed, in which Jose highlighted, I think, very, very aptly in his video, is, that moment in which, Nick Fuentes is going like, and then we're talking about foreign aid to Israel, you understand, like foreign aid to Israel. That was something that really converted me. And Elijah Schaffer is like, hold on. Are you talking about like foreign aid to Israel in specific? Or are you talking about foreign aid to like foreign countries instead of, like, he is like, tamping this down because he understands how not to like get into the actual overt Nazi shit, which like Milo Yiannopoulos or, Gavin McGinnis in like 2016, 2017 were not like able to do in so much of a way. And like, that's where I think like, and just to bring it back to Elijah knows exactly where the boundary is in terms of like keeping his bread buttered by Blaze TV, by Glen Beck. He knows where the line is, which also means that he absolutely knows how terrible Nick Fuentes and the people more terrible than Nick Fuentes are. And I just like, it's hard for me not to look at that and go, yeah, this is going to get worse before it gets better, and I'm sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like the 2020, if Elijah Schaffer is the 2022 iteration of the problem, then it's kind of like that exchange to me is like the 2022 iteration of the problem, kind of coaching the 2017 version into 2022. It's like saying this is how you say it now. And if you just sort of learn these new rules, you can come along with us openly, and it's fine.
It is worrying thinking about how to address this in the year 2022. And it's definitely a question I've been asking myself. I mean, the direction my YouTube channel's gone, I would love nothing more than to just talk about, I don't know, Sabrina the Teenage Witch or something. And that would be it. I could just talk about old TV shows from the 90s. It'd be nice to not have to think about these people. But at the same time, I feel like there's something that should be done. Awareness needs to be raised, and we need to be, hyper vigilant, more so than ever, particularly when we see, the attacks on the trans community right now. When you see legislation being introduced to deny people healthcare, like how can we not be talking about this? Even that sort of recent story about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and how that just became a thing on YouTube as a way of just dumping all over the Me Too movement and trying to portray women as hysterical liars about their abusers. Like all this stuff is just coming back again, the way it was in 2016 or 2017 on YouTube, as what the rest of the world is going to be seen and has been seen for some time. And I think it was a mistake to think we had turned the corner. Not that I certainly didn't think we had, and I'm sure neither of you thought we had turned the corner on anything, but I think a lot of people did. A lot of people thought, once Trump's gone, things will change, things will get better. And it really hasn't. It's just kind of, the can has been kicked down the road, but it's still there, and we're coming up on it again. And this time it's nastier, got sharper edges. And we really just have to be, I think, fight back against it as hard as we can, really.
Agreed completely.
There's a phrase which I believe it comes from James Connolly originally. He was talking about the partition of Ireland, a carnival of reaction, and I felt that way looking at YouTube. In the last few weeks with the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp thing, where it's just, I didn't go looking for that story, but it was foisted upon me, and the completely normalized virulent misogyny. And the thing that's scary about that is that they are repeating extremely reactionary ideas and talking points via the vector of talking about domestic violence and abuse and things like that. And a lot of them don't even realize they're doing it. And I mean, I think a lot of them do, but a lot of the people that are talking about this don't realize they're doing it, but they are engaging in that same sort of political economic behaviorism that we were talking about before with Rubin, sort of being led by the audience, because there's this massive appetite on social media for content that feeds these sorts of impulses.
I just saw a story, I think it was published earlier today. I believe it was from Taylor Lorenz, actually, at the Washington Post, talking about how YouTubers who have been discussing this trial have made something like over $100,000 just from like super chats covering the trial live, which is, I think, tells you everything you need to know about the incentives that exist on YouTube. If you can produce just huge volumes of content that speak to people who are willing to pay money to have certain narratives being reinforced, then yeah, it's going to make you big money, and you will, you'll make lots of money. But I don't know. It's up to each of these people to decide how they sleep at night. But I certainly can think of better ways to earn a living.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But the thing about Elijah Schaffer is, we touched upon this a bit, is he's kind of this weird mix of, it's a weird word to use about him, but he's this weird mix of guilelessness, because he does just kind of talk. He gets enthusiastic and he just talks and talks and it comes out. And he gets hyped up, and some of the stuff that comes out, it's obviously unguarded, I think. But at the same time, he's a mix of that and canniness, and you can see that in that conversation where he's guiding Nick Fuentes. So he knows the rules of the game, and he's using them to put across this genuine enthusiasm he has for absolutely wicked, evil, crackpot, far right ideas. Everything is obviously in the mix, but he's as I say, he's the 2022 version. He's canny to the rules of the game. He knows how to present it aesthetically now, post 2017, post COVID, post everything, and that is, the thing about, I mean, particularly sharply recently, the Amber Heard Johnny Depp thing, is that it demonstrates that the audience is there for this kind of thing, delinked from overt politics. If it can, it's there to be sold on social media if you present it aesthetically the right way. And as you were saying, Daniel, they learned the lessons of 2017, marching through the streets waving swastikas. Probably not going to try that approach again. Elijah Schaffer is for me, he's becoming emblematic of sort of the way in which fascism, let's call it what it is, fascism is going to work in the social media age.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on something there where you were talking about how he's in some ways guileless, but he does still know the rules. And I think the sort of more unguarded moments, when he'll just say something absolutely ridiculous. Like, one thing I remember from my videos, he thought the whole, the nonsense groomer narrative, of course, he believes that's like to prime people so that children can get molested in the metaverse in 20 years, which is just like, I don't even know what to say to that. That's just so ridiculous. But it's the reason he sort of gets on these flights of fancy is because he is a true believer. And I think that authenticity is what makes him also attractive. So he's someone who knows the rules of the game, but he still believes it as well. So he isn't just this kind of, so he doesn't seem like a grifter. Because I think that's another thing that appeals to the audience. They want to feel like the guy talking to them believes what they're saying. And in his case, that might come with a little, the misstep every now and again. But he's been trained. He knows where some of the lines are, even if he lets his enthusiasm sometimes take him over those lines and, say his boss is going to hell and something on Twitter, which sometimes that gets him into trouble.
Well, and the fact that he wasn't fired immediately kind of says something about that, right? Like, I'm just imagining if I was like, my boss is going to go to hell on Twitter, like I would be fired tomorrow. They know what the asset they have in Elijah Schaffer. Like they have given him an enormous amount of resources. Like I'm just kind of imagining what, not to speak for you, Jose, but what any one of us could do with the level of resources that the Blaze has like given to Elijah Schaffer in terms of like, a studio and like a camera crew and an editor and, producer and all that sort of thing in terms of like, if we just wanted to make more content and like put good into the world. And it speaks volumes that like he, based on his like kind of bullshit interviews from 2018 and based on like kind of what he was doing is attracted that kind of attention, ultimately, and the fact that despite, how far he goes, like he does, even if he can't attract advertisers, he attracts, an audience, which is kind of the same thing that Fox News is dealing with Tucker Carlson on a very different scale, of course. But, Tucker Carlson has been bleeding advertisers for years, but because he is like saying the things that the audience wants to hear, he gets to stick around. And I think that's what Elijah Schaffer is kind of like banking on right now.
I mean, it was also Glen Beck's whole story when he was at Fox News as well. He was someone who had trouble holding on to advertisers, but his ratings were so strong that Fox just felt, obliged to keep this huge draw to their network on their airwaves until ultimately he had to go. I've heard varying stories on how that worked out, but he certainly didn't leave Fox News a poor man, considering he went around and started a media company where he bled tons of money. But that's the story of the Blaze, which is a whole other subject.
I feel like if this was the YouTube video, now is where we clip the Samantha Bee hugging Glen Beck just after in early 2017, just to prove the liberals are fucking useless narrative. But sorry if that might be a little bit too much, Jose. But again,
I know exactly what you mean. That was wow. I remember I read one of Glen Beck's books where he was talking about that moment, and he kind of felt like he had to apologize to his own audience for it. But at the same time, he didn't spend much time dawdling on it. He was just like, yeah, that was something I had to do because I thought the left could be reasoned with. It's like, okay.
Did you read as a novel, by the way, The Overton Window?
It's a treat.
Yeah. that it's worth a video is all I'm saying.
I may have already made a video on that novel, actually.
Oh, did you?
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Jose's already done that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I read the blog of. Sorry, that's apologies. I thought I knew all your videos by heart, but we can cut all this shit. Yeah, that's fine. Don't make me look like an idiot. That's that's the way to go. Or do that's the better way.
I'm perfectly happy.
I'll cover for you again, Daniel. Don't worry.
Jack just saves me whenever I say stupid shit. That's how I sound really intelligent on this podcast. Yeah,
that's what I need someone like that for my videos too. That would be nice. Just cut out the part where I say anything silly. Actually, I covered 2 of Glen Beck's novels. He also had that one, The Immortal Nicholas. That was where Santa and Jesus have a crossover. That was a weird one.
Holy shit! What? Sorry, what'd you say?
So it rewrites the story of Saint Nicholas to make him this immortal man who becomes the silent protector for Jesus, like his own personal Batman. And then once Jesus dies, he like dons the red hat and becomes the gift man known as Santa Claus. That's a book he wrote.
Oh my God. Serious?
Yeah, that's
Never heard of this.
I have a whole video on it if you really want to know more about this book. It was
yes, it's what I'm going to be doing immediately after we stop recording.
Yeah,
trust me.
I feel like I've seen every Jose video, but apparently not. This is
well, the Santa Jesus one is an underrated classic, to be honest. Not a lot of people watch that one.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Great. It was one of those ones where
somehow I missed that.
It was Glen Beck's phase where he was just burning money. He actually produced a trailer for this book, and it's something else. I don't know how much money he spent on that trailer, but like thousands and thousands of dollars. He hired actors. There were sets and costumes. It's a treat, that book.
You're opening up a whole new world to me. I must immediately, sorry. All right, podcast over. I've got to go.
Glen Beck IDSG episode with Jose as a special guest coming up around episode 130. Expect that, people.
If we can just talk about the works of fiction by Glen Beck, that would make my day.
I was thinking about doing a bonus episode about the Overton window because I thought I was the only fucking person who had ever read that thing, but.
Well, he just met the second person.
Yeah, well, that's how it goes.
I'm familiar with the contents of the Overton window, but I'm familiar with it via Jose's video. So Jose did that thing where he fell on the hand grenade for me.
I actually know there is a third person because there was a blog called Overton Windex, which went through it chapter by chapter back when it first, and that's really where I first understood there was this terrifying novel by Glen Beck, but
I think I might have to check that blog out. Might give me a flashback, but
don't tease the panther is the the key, phrase that I remember from that blog.
That's one of those lines I loved testing out on any of my female friends. If I just what if a guy said this to you? And you could see the full body shudders, and they would tell me they would run. They would say that's when I start running.
I thought you were going to say I'd invite a girl to my apartment. We'd be in bed. And then she would kind of get a little bit fresh with me. And I'd be like, don't tease the panther. And then how she responded would determine, whether I wanted to sleep with her or not. And really it's and then I felt the bracing smell of mace. That's the answer to that question.
You just answered exactly why I would never try something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's hard to not think that Glen Beck, it's hard to not imagine Glen Beck as author insert at 50 years old being don't tease the panther. And it's dude, seriously? You're the doughiest white boy that ever doughiest white boy,
Well, I was reading interviews he did about that book where he was talking about how he didn't want to insert any sort of cheap, tawdry, salacious bits, which is why they at no point does the main character and his love interest ever get physical. I think at the end of that scene where he says, don't tease the panther, he then gets up to go sleep on the couch afterwards, which I got to say is not something you often see in these kinds of books. Or no, wait, they share the bed, but they don't hook up. I think that's what happened there.
No, that's the thing. That's the Mormon, sort of, I mean, not even an insult to very fine practicing Mormons whose theology I disagree with and whose social ideology I disagree with, but not even in disagreement to that, but this is sort of the fantasy, the resolute Mormon who can sleep next to the gorgeous woman with, a heart on and just not do anything because he's just that, observant or whatever. It's such that that fantasy that comes from that kind of world. We are far away from Elijah Schaffer at this point, who I am fairly certain has never actually been aroused in his life.
Well, and hasn't written a novel yet either. Although I think, and I'm not being original. I can't remember who said this. It might have been the guys on the QAnon Anonymous podcast, but all these people should be forced to write novels, because they always reveal exactly who they are in the novels, like the Ben Shapiro novel and the Glen Beck novel and Bill O'Reilly. Loads of them do it, and it's always just so revealing. It's so honest. Finally, you get to the unintentional revelation of the truth when they put their hands to fiction. They should all have to write novels by law. If you want to be a right-wing public commentator, you have to write a novel. That would be the one law I would bring in.
I would sign up for that law just because of the bounty it would be for my channel. It would just be like I'd enter the promised land, to enter this world of right-wing commentators writing novels, because I sign on to everything you just said there. It reveals their deepest thoughts and anxieties through what they, I think, assume is the safe lens of fiction. And I eat them like candy. I am so excited to read the next one. I think
Elijah Schaffer's novel would be lit.
Oh, can you imagine what that book would be?
It would be a journalist who goes around to like drag queen story hour and is disgusted by, what he finds there. And then it turns out there is like Antifa terrorist groups who are like disguising themselves as MAGA hat people, planting bombs and like shooting people. And like, it's up to the journalist to work with the sexy FBI agent, and to go on to solve the crime, etc. Like, that's exactly what we would find from that story, I'm sure.
I think you're missing the big plot twist at the end, though, or maybe not even the end, but he soon finds out that all these Antifa people are secretly demons, and he has to take down a satanic cult with the power of the Lord on his side.
That just goes without saying with Elijah, right?
The only one that wouldn't be fun would be Tim Pool's novel, because that would just be about a rugged, incredibly
a skateboarder for sure. He's got to ride a skateboard. Yeah, it would be a
handsome, young, rugged skateboarding journalist called Jim Cool or something, with a full head of hair, but the novel would just be him sat doing interviews with people and explaining about Thanos and universalism versus consequence. His novel would just be his career. It would just be that, except with hair. That would be it.
I feel like we could convince him to write it, though. He did release that music video last year, so he's clearly got an artist inside of him just aching to scream. And I encourage that. I encourage all of them to follow that passion.
I mean, just for the content, like our careers are built on, these people continuing to be cringe. So that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm still waiting for Ben Shapiro to get one of his screenplays turned into something. I mean, the Daily Wire is producing movies now. How have they not done that yet? How have they not taken one of his very special stories to turn it into a movie?
I can't think of Ben Shapiro screenplay and not think of, the Michael Scott screenplay in The Office.
Level Midnight.
Where it's not just like, and then Shen Shapiro shows up and like shoots the bad guys. It's very that, God, imagine what Crowder's screenplay would be. He's already wearing the Uncharted, gun holsters. How bad could that get ultimately?
It would just be him going around killing people who are not white. That would be a big part of it, I imagine.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
Anyway, we are very far afield from anything that is like remotely relevant to like a conversation. But this has been really fun.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I didn't expect us to end up talking about the works of fiction of various right-wing figures, but I'm glad this is where it led us.
Yeah, sometimes we just like to let people off with a break. And the next episode is going to be Emily Eucas, which I promised 3 episodes ago, but it is going to be the next episode. And that's going to just like This one is like the fun one where we just talk about like novels of terrible people, and the next one's going to start with white Sharia rape gangs. So just to be clear, this is the lighthearted version of what this podcast is going to be moving forward for the next few months.
Well, with that enticement issued, thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks again to our special guest, Jose, brilliant YouTuber. Go and watch all his videos, which apparently I haven't done. I thought I had, but apparently not. Give us money on Patreon, please, and listen to our episodes, and just be excellent to each other. Goodbye.
Jose, where can we find you on the internet? We should do that. Oh, yeah, first.
Sorry. Forgot that bit. Professional podcaster.
As mentioned before, I am on YouTube. Very easy to find. You type Jose into the search bar. I should be one of the top results. You see an adorable cartoon blue jay as the icon for the channel. That's me. You can subscribe, watch all my videos. They're all great, every single one of them. Also on Twitter, my handle for that is Jose, not a J, not all one word. And J is spelled Jay. I also have a Patreon, which is got some, patreon.com/Jose on YouTube. Good thing I had that page pulled up. Those are all the ways to find me on the internet.
I just signed up for that, and I was amused to find my name in the Elijah Schaffer video, like scrolling up. It's like, and then Daniel Harper. I'm like, oh, I know that guy at least. So, please subscribe. It's great.
Hey, if you become a patron, that could happen to you. You could be sitting there and seeing your name in the credits, and isn't that just worth everything?
If your name is something similar to Daniel Harper, you could be right next to or right before me. And so you should do that for sure.
You can even have a custom name. You could be like, Daniel Harper is really cool, or Daniel Harper really sucks. If you want to
I would like to see 20 people join with Daniel Harper really sucks 1, Daniel Harper really sucks 2, Daniel Harper really sucks 3, but as long as they all are paying you, it doesn't bother me at all. So, please do so.
Daniel Harper's pre-podcast beard. That would be a good one.
Hey, as long as they're under my Patreon, I accept all names.
Thanks a lot for coming in, Jose. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can. I would love to have you back again. Hopefully, you've had a good experience despite all the bullshit. But this has been fun, and I really do enjoy your content, in particular the sitcom content. Please, everybody, go watch the Married with Children episode. I know that's the big one, but it is. For someone who grew up in the 80s as I did, it really does bring joy to my heart. So go check it out. Go check them all out. He's great.
Thank you so much. It was a blast to be on. And anytime you want me on here, come back.
Okay, that's a wrap. That was I Don't Speak German. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful, please spread the word. If you want to contact me, I'm @_Jack_Graham_. Daniel is @Daniel E. Harper, and the show's Twitter is @IDSGpod. If you want to help us make the show and stay 100% editorially independent, we both have Patreons. I Don't Speak German is hosted at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and we show up in all podcast apps. This show is associated with Eruditorum Press, where you can find more details about it. The music was by Loon the Band.